Hey Fashion Crossroads fans, it's Wednesday Wardrobing Live. This is our last Wednesday Wardrobing Live video about laundry and caring for your best clothes. It is raining cats and dogs outside, thundering, huge thunder boomers. I'm actually glad I'm here talking to you guys, and hopefully by the time I'm done the rain will have stopped and I won't have to wait it out until I can walk the 40 steps to my front door. Oh my goodness, this is always the month where we get those great big huge thunder boomers, and we definitely are getting one tonight. So I hope that you are all safe and dry as you are watching this. We are super excited to finish this series out. I ended up basically doing a book report tonight on this book. It's called Laundry Love, Finding Joy in a Common Chore by Patric Richardson. So what happened was I heard about this book on NPR. I heard the author interviewed on NPR, and it intrigued me. He was talking about some different stain removal techniques than I had ever heard of before, and I'm not very good at getting stains out of my clothes, and so I thought, well, I want to get that and see if his stain removal methods will work for me. So I did, so I got it, and I decided, well, you know, that's a good topic to do for Wednesday Wardrobing, because if you're gonna spend money on your clothes, then you want to know how to care for them so that they last a long time. And you know, having been putting so much of our inventory on Shopify in the last year, Shopify is basically the software that we use for our online store. So in putting our in-store inventory to our online store inventory, in the description we always put the fabric content and the care instructions. So I've read a ton of care instructions over the years, over this past year, and I've noticed how many are just simply saying hand wash and hang to dry. And one of the contentions that this author makes is that all of these clothes that are making us hand wash them, lay them flat to dry, spot clean only, what are the other ones? Wash in cold water, dry flat, all of those things are just creating more work for us than is necessary. And so I thought, wow, okay, I'm interested in this. I want to read this. So I thought that last week I would just come to you, having looked at his stain removal techniques, and be like, hey, so here's what I do. Doesn't always work that great. Here are some others that I learned, and share them with you. But then as I started reading this book, I realized there was so much more to it. So what I have done is actually read most of the book, about 90% of the book, and I have summarized it for you in this week's blog post, and I'm also going to talk to you about that tonight. And for the video viewers, we're also going to talk about some of his pro tips, which I found incredibly interesting. Okay, so Patric Richardson is was a salesperson at luxury stores like Nordstrom's and those kinds of places where they dealt with very high-end manufacturers that used high-end fabrics like cashmere and real silk and things like that. So that's how he first kind of got into this, was he got exposed to the fact that they needed to give laundering instructions to their customers for these high-end fabrics. He also had the benefit of working with manufacturers and vendors of those products and hearing from them how the manufacturers recommended laundering. From there, he went to teaching a laundry class at the Mall of America to thousands of people, and he owns his own boutique. He has his own laundry store where he sells a lot of the products that he talks about in the book. So I feel like he might be enough of an expert in to listen to. The part of his bio that really resonated with me was the fact that he was a boutique owner, and the reason for that is because we end up being the middleman in between the manufacturers and our customers, right? And because we deal with so many different manufacturers to create or curate a special inventory, we kind of know the manufacturers who are legit in their care instructions and the manufacturers who are just putting hand wash in cold and hang to dry on all of their clothing because it's cheaper for them to produce one care tag than it is to produce 100 different care tags. So that is something that really resonated with me, because I'm like, okay, he's a boutique owner, he gets this whole side of things, and he gets that there's a difference in between manufacturers sometimes and their recommendations for care. So because of that, I thought it was worth taking a look at what he had to say. So here are his 5 steps for taking care of your clothing, washing and drying your clothing. So number 1 is to sort all of your textiles. So your clothes, your towels, your sheets, all of those kinds of textiles into 5 loads. The first one would be your whites and almost whites. The second would be your blacks, not your darks, your blacks. Your third would be your cool colors. Your fourth would be your warm colors. And your fifth would be your athletic wear. The rationale behind the warm and cool piles is if micro-dye bleed occurs in the wash of either of the warm or cool loads, no one will even notice. Because you're putting like colors together, if you get a micro-dye bleed, it's not going to make something obvious where you're going to have to throw the clothing away, or it's the piece of clothing away, or it's going to be obvious that you had a micro-dye bleed. Athletic wear needs to be washed separately because of its tendency to hold on to body oil and repel water. This particular load needs to be washed with a detergent that contains hydrogen peroxide, which will help get out the body oil. So if you struggle with your athletic clothes of getting the smell out, that's because the way that you're washing them is not getting the body oil out of the clothing and the sweat out of the clothing properly, and therefore you don't ever get rid of that smell. So that was important. So step 2, you've got your piles, right? You've got your whites, you've got your blacks, you've got your cools, you've got your warms, you've got your athletic wear. From those piles, and by the way, those piles include your towels and your sheets. So that's a really different methodology than what I have done all my life and what I was taught. So you're separating your sheets and your towels into those piles as well. Then out of those piles, you're going to remove all of your silky, satiny items. So it can be silk, actual silk, or it can just be anything that is of a satin fabric. And you're going to take all of those and you're going to use the mesh laundry bags. You can buy them at Walmart. They're about this big. They zip closed. And you are going to put all of your silky clothing in those mesh bags. You can fill one up until it's full without stuffing. And that is going to protect your delicate items from getting abrasion, rubs from your towels and other rougher things. You also are going to do this with your woolens. He actually has a way of washing wool items so that you don't have to dry clean them. He goes over that in this book as well. With the wools, he recommends rolling them up tightly into a small ball and then placing them in the mesh bag. Then once you've got your silks, your satins, and your wools in mesh bags, you're going to put them back in your particular laundry piles. Now what I would add to this is that you also need to put your bras in those same bags. So your bras that you would normally put in your whites pile, you also need to put those in mesh bags. And the reason for that is you don't want the wrenching that happens in a washing machine with your bras. So what you need to do is you need to put the cups together so the cups are kind of like inside each other. Fold the bra up and stick it in the mesh bag. And if I usually can fit 3 or 4 bras in one mesh bag. I have different kinds. I have some that are larger, some that are smaller, but I can usually put 2 or 3 bras in one bag, and then I wash them that way, and then I hang them to dry. So he doesn't talk about your nice lingerie, but that is also how you would want to wash your nice lingerie. Most lingerie too, if you're looking at your nicer quality silk and satin pajamas and things, those are going to fall into that silk and satin category that you might have been washing in delicate. He wants you to put those in the mesh bag and put them in the appropriate color pile. So obviously with your mesh bags, you're not going to be mixing colors from the color piles. You are always maintaining those color piles. Then step 3 is to stop using detergents with volatile organic compounds, otherwise known as VOCs, which he basically says is anything that comes in a gigantic bottle that we buy at the grocery store. So all of those huge Tide bottles, all of those other different kinds of detergents that come in the huge bottles usually are the ones that contain these volatile organic compounds. They harm your lungs, organs, and can cause cancer. Instead, we should opt for soaps and detergents made with plant and mineral-based ingredients, essential oils, and floral extracts. Look for words like non-toxic, biodegradable, allergen-free, bleach-free, petroleum-free, phosphate-free, and, oh boy, PHTHALATE, fat hullet, I don't know, free. He also recommends to stop using chlorine bleach, which actually yellows whites. That was crazy to me. He talked about this in the book. He explained that the thing that makes whites bright white is the optic white dye that they use to dye the cotton that color. Because if you think about it, cotton is not white naturally. It's more of an ecru color. So he says that when you use chlorine bleach, it actually breaks down the optic white dye, and therefore the more natural ecru colors come through, and that's where you see your white starting to yellow. That is crazy. I've never heard that before. I definitely have heard that chlorine bleach is not healthy for us. That's not healthy for our lungs, anything like that. He recommends going to washing whites with a tablespoon of chlorine-free oxygen bleach. So step 4, now this might blow some of your minds. This is where he departs from our traditional way of doing things. Generally, when I would do laundry, I would have my whites, my darks, my towels, my sheets, and my cold water wash. And 70% of my clothes were in the cold water wash category. So 70% of the clothing I was cold water washing on delicate cycle and then hanging to dry. So he's really switching it up here. He recommends washing everything on warm in the express cycle. And his rationale behind that is that the express cycle is short enough that your clothing is only actually getting exposed to 8 minutes of warm water. And that is not long enough to harm them. You're not washing it for an hour in warm water. You're washing it for 8 minutes in warm water. And this is very interesting too. He says even cold water detergents are designed to work in water that is 58 to 62 degrees Fahrenheit. Manufacturers define this as cold. Unfortunately, cold water in our homes is likely just 53 degrees or so. And that means our cold water setting isn't warm enough to dissolve our detergents, which means they're not activating and our clothes aren't getting clean. Well, hello, I don't want clothes that aren't clean. That really struck me. I was like, oh my gosh, you know, I'm washing them in cold water, but if the detergent isn't activating, if the soap that I'm putting in there isn't activating, then they're not getting clean, the fibers aren't getting clean, the clothes aren't getting clean. So the warm water guarantees that you're activating the detergent, you're doing the express cycle, so it's only in there for 8 minutes, and then you're going to choose the high spin option on your washing cycle so that you get as much water out of your clothes as you possibly can. And that is to reduce drying time, either in the dryer or if you're hanging it to dry. Let's see if there's anything else. Nope, that's it. Okay, and then step 5 is to hang to dry anything made with a woven fabric. So basically anything that the fabric is created by weaving fibers together, you're going to hang to dry. You're going to dry regular on use your drying machine to dry t-shirts, socks, underwear, sheets, and towels. But most of your better clothing, so this part I was doing right according to this method, most of your better clothing is going to be hung to dry, including your sweaters. He says that most high quality textiles can endure 50 trips through the washer and dryer. That means if you machine wash and machine dry a favorite shirt once a week, you'll have worn it out in a year. If, however, you skip the dryer and hang up this item to dry, you've just bought yourself at least 70 more trips through the washer and more than another year of wear. And that statistic about how many times most modern fabrics can be washed and dried is from the National Council of Textile Organizations. He also contends that it is not necessary to lay all of your knits like sweaters to dry. Similarly to chemical detergents, dryer sheets and softeners are a no-no. They coat your clothing with silicone, which keeps your clothing from absorbing water, decreases the breathability, makes mist stains almost impossible to get out, and coats your dryer's lint catcher. So if you've been using dryer sheets, Patric Richardson says please stop doing that. So how close is that to what you have been doing? Like I told you, I was organizing my clothes totally differently, washing my clothes totally differently, but drying and hanging my clothes very similarly to what he recommends here. He also had some really great pro tips, which I thought were great, especially for the dryer. He suggests using wool balls in your dryer and putting essential oils on the wool balls. So 3 or 4 drops of essential oil on the wool balls, and he suggests I think 4 wool balls. And I guess what they do is they decrease the drying time by a ton. And so what that does then is it's less wear and tear on your clothing, and the essential oils in the wool balls will give you a fragrance for your clothing. You can choose whatever you liked. He recommended peppermint and lavender, but you could choose whatever you liked. You'll still get that smell that you might get from a dryer sheet, but you'll have the benefit of not having the negatives of the dryer sheets and actually decreasing the drying time of your clothes. He also suggested using bumpy balls, which I don't know what bumpy dryer balls are, but again, that I think is to help puff up your your terry cloth and your cottons, and so just like you would put a tennis ball in with your down clothing to get the loft back in the down, I guess bumpy dryer balls will do the same thing for your cottons, your towels, your sheets. Just kind of give it that, refresh that loft and that softness and that puffiness that that fabric had originally. So I thought that was great. He also had some really cool tips that I wanted to share as well that I didn't include in the blog, that I thought were pretty interesting. He said that if you have clothing, he makes the point, and I agree with this 100%, that we don't need to wash our clothing as much as we do, that actually we overwash our clothing. The only time you really need to wash your clothing is if it's dirty. If your clothing is just picked up an odor, like maybe you were in a restaurant and now your clothing smells like that, or you were around a campfire and now your clothing smells like that, he says that you can put a little bit of vodka. I'm trying to remember how much he tells you. A little bit of vodka in a spray bottle, and spritz your clothing where it has the odors, and he said it'll completely take away the odor. And he said that that is like it's an old trick that's been around for a really long time. I've never heard of it. I'd be really curious if you've ever heard of it. That's brand new to me, but he said that's been around for a really long time. It's a pro trick. Let's see. He also talks about putting a tightly rolled ball of aluminum foil in every dryer load to discharge static, so that when your laundry comes out, you don't get that crackle, crackle, crackle. He said take a yard of aluminum foil and roll it into a ball roughly the size of a baseball. Then just throw it into your dryer. It should last about 60 loads, getting increasingly smaller with each. Once it shrinks to the size of a golf ball, simply toss it into your recycling container and start over with a new one. Really cool, because who likes static cling in their washing machine, right? Let's see what else. He also talked about blocking, which is another, I guess, pro trick. And this is when you need to stretch an item in one particular area of your body. So it needs to be a little bit bigger in your bust, or it needs a little bit bigger in your tummy, or a little bit bigger in your hips. He said it's called blocking. And what you do is before washing your garment, you lay it flat and then measure its width and its length. Pay particular attention to the area you want to make larger or smaller. How much? 1 inch, 2 inches? Make note of that. Wash as normal. Lay the clean and damp garment flat again and massage the section of the garment with your hands to the size you require, based on the measurement you took previously. To ensure the garment dries exactly to your preferred dimensions, I recommend pinning the item along its edge with straight pins to something behind it, so a sheet or a towel or something, so that it dries at those dimensions. Who knew? That was crazy. Once your garment is completely dry, remove the pins and it's ready to wear with its perfect fit. Very cool, right? Okay, here's the airing out section. So to air out your clothes, place strong smelling clothes on hangers and then hang them outside for a few hours on a porch deck or laundry line. When your clothes smell like smoke, French fries, or some other thing that you don't like, you can simply pour vodka, cheap vodka works, into a spray bottle and spritz on the article in question. Okay, so it's not diluted, it's just straight vodka. Vodka kills any bacteria and removes all scents, including cigarette smoke and strong food odors. Very interesting, right? So that's the vodka trick. Okay, so then I wanted to tell you about his stain removal methods because he's using a lot of natural products that don't require like shout and other kinds of things like that. So for a stain that you need to treat right now because you're going to wear the item, he recommends taking a makeup pad, so like the little cotton makeup pads, putting some rubbing alcohol on it and then dabbing and lifting on that stain until the stain is no longer there. Exchanging makeup pads if you need to keep dabbing and lifting until the stain is no longer there. He doesn't recommend pre-treating stains. He doesn't recommend pre-treating stains, but instead to treat them right before you wash them. So he says to, how he normally does it is to, let's see, I have it in my blog. Then I don't have to look through the book to find it. So using a mixture of water and vinegar to cut oil and a laundry brush and bar laundry soap, he sprays the stain with the vinegar and water solution and then wets a laundry brush, brushes it a couple times across a laundry bar, and then delicately, gently rubs out the stain. And this process is repeated with a white washcloth underneath the stain to absorb the stain. So the process is completed until the stain is out, and then the item is washed. So I thought that was incredibly interesting. The whole idea of the vinegar and water solution to take oil out of a stain, and then the laundry soap to actually help the stain release from the fibers. I thought that that was really interesting. So that is my book review. And I am going to turn my phone around because it's facing the other direction. And look at you guys. All right, so that is interesting, right? A little bit different. Oh, this is not wanting to stay. A little bit, oh, well, shoot. Okay, I'm just going to do this. A little bit different than definitely what I've learned. I'm sure a little different than what you've learned. So I would love your comments about this and about what you think. Does this sound right? Does this sound wrong? Are you going to try it? What do you think? I'd love to hear it. All right, so next month's Wednesday wardrobing, we are not going to have one next week. Next month's Wednesday wardrobing, starting in June, will be how to wear it. So I'm going to take each Wednesday wardrobing video and talk about how to wear the latest styles of the season, how to style them with shoes and all of those kinds of things. So I hope you'll be looking forward to that and that you will join me for that. Bye-bye.